Banale Mandaza from the Botswana Initiative of World Education, managing some of their programs in Zimbabwe. Banale, welcome, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jason, and everybody that's here. Thank you for joining. Botswana has been building the youth economic empowerment model for over 10 years, and I think we have learned a few things, and one thing I just want to highlight in terms of what the challenges that young women face, to add on to what Jason had mentioned, is that economic opportunities for adolescent girls exist within localized value chains. And this is what we've learned over 10 years of programming and seeing how things work, especially within the Dreams context. And in Zimbabwe, we reached over 3,000 young women with this particular model, which has now been refined to what we're presenting today, which is the Siyakha Girls model. In essence, in covering the gaps or in addressing the gaps of our work over the years, we developed a theory of change that says if we build the life skills of adolescent girls and young women, add to that market-specific vocational training, and I'll get to that a little bit later, include a compelling value proposition to industry, improve their financial literacy, and then very specifically address sexual harassment in the workplace and support their transition into full-time or self-employment while engaging male partners as enablers, then we could potentially increase the retention and completion of economic strengthening programs, as well as improve young women's employability. Next slide, please. And I think that's really important to keep at the back of our minds, that girls getting involved in and actually completing brings us to a greater impact in terms of their livelihood. So that birthed the Siyakha Girls model. And Siyakha is an Isindebele word, which means to build. And so we see this particular model as a partnership with the stakeholders in a young woman's life. It's optimized for young women 18 years above in the context of Zimbabwe, because that's the legal age where you can be employed. It's targeting girls in the corridor, what we call girls in the corridor. These are girls with very limited academic prospects. And as Carrie mentioned earlier, these are girls who can't go back to school, but can't move forward either and find themselves in this straits, if you would. It's designed to work with the girls' aptitude and interest, amplifying a financial literacy and a savings discipline, as well as employment and entrepreneurship pathways, with a keen focus on the micro value chains that are available. If you could go back one, thank you. So the model itself has 8 steps, and I'll quickly go through each of the steps, just highlighting its deliverables. So step number 1 is a labor market assessment, which I think Carrie mentioned as well, which is critical because it highlights for us the entry nodes that are suitable for young women within a value chain within their community. It also highlights recommendations for vocational training. In other words, our partnership within the model is working with the interest of the girls, but also looking at the support of TVET institutions in the location or in the community. It's very critical to engage business within that local market assessment. Step number 2 is our selection process of how we actually select the girls. And what's critical for me to mention here is that the selection process is deliberately intended to mirror the job application process. We know these are vulnerable young women. We know they have limited exposure, but it's also important for us to begin their learning from the selection process, which includes assisting them to put together a job application letter and put together a CV in order to be presented for selection as you would in the world of work. Once the girls are selected, they come into a 5-day introductory training, which we call the foundational training. This covers life skills, financial literacy, and leadership. Critical for us here is that at this point, the girls are not only trained to start, but also supported to begin a savings discipline, which will carry them through the entire model. At the end of that 5-day training, we have a selection process for those girls who are moving into the comprehensive package, which I'll explain. What's critical to mention here that we introduced within the pilot is the social contract. The social contract itself is a retention mechanism within the model that allows us to engage the male partner, the husband, or the family of this young woman in a partnership for retention, highlighting that should the girl drop out of the program in the course of the following steps, then that guarantor is liable to pay back funds that have been spent on that young woman to that point. And we found that the social contract really does increase buy-in and is essential for retention. Moving on to step number 4, is the vocational training. The vocational training itself is designed, as I said earlier, to speak to the entry nodes into the micro value chain that have been identified by the labor market assessment. So in other words, the vocational training is tailored to speak to what is available, what is a growth pocket, what is a potential area within the community where these young women are found. They are supported through that vocational training, including things like tools for work as well as transport to increase retention. At the end of the vocational training, they come back for step number 5, which is the 4-day social asset training. What's critical to mention here is that as we build the agency of these young women in preparation for the world of work, we also spend time focusing on the identification, reporting, and prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace, which we know is an inhibitor for retention or for completion in most cases. And in that, we help the girls as well as the potential mentors to understand the dynamics and work through and establish the principles that can help us with retention within the world of work. And that, of course, leads us to the internship stage of the model, where the girls are actually in work, supported by the value proposition that we've made to these host businesses and companies. Step number 7, after that, a 3-month internship, the girls, the stakeholders, the caregivers, your social contract guarantors all come through for a 1-day exit review meeting where we get feedback on how the process has gone firsthand. Although throughout the processes there has been robust support, placement support for the young women themselves, but we get feedback that helps the girls then decide on the graduation pathway. And for us, the model has 2 graduation points. Number 1 is either employed in the host business, or 2, going into self-employment, or going into group business. And so underpinned from step number 3 is the tracking of their savings culture and how they're doing with their savings as individuals as well as in the group. Next slide, please. So having understood our 8-step model, we want to share with you some of the pilot results that we were able to achieve. 98% retention, and that was an improvement in our programming from our previous rounds of activity. And so we know that the social contract had a part to play with that, and certain other things. 65% of the young women were in an improved economic position after 7 months, which was the duration of the project. And what we mean by the improved economic position is this. 7 of them at the end of the project were employed full-time. And after 12 months of the project, that number had doubled to 14. We had 27% starting their own businesses, 25% actively seeking employment. Next slide, please. Just to highlight in this next slide some of the key highlights of our model. Number one, we can't overemphasize the labor market assessment, the robust mentorship and placement support. And it also, this model has place within urban and rural contexts. We are seeing in this year, at the beginning of October, scaling up this model to reach 9,000 young women in a rural setup, and as well as to mention that this model has been recommended by PEPFAR as a possible model in their COP20 considerations. And so that's what we wanted to share with you, that it is a model that is addressing some of the gaps that we'd seen in our own previous programming, and is poised to answer some of the gaps that I think Jason mentioned a little bit earlier. That's it from me. Thank you for your time.